Hey everybody, it's Courtney and I'm back with another design team project for Trinity stamps. Today I'll be using the Lady Liberty stamp set. This is a mini set here. We're going to be creating a very clean and simple one-layer card. I'm starting off with a piece of Nina Solar White 80-pound cardstock. This is cut down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I'll be masking out the edges of the card, and we're just going to be adding the stamped images right there to the center. I'm using 1-inch post-it note tape here to mask out all 4 sides. And I'm just using the edge of my card panel there to line it up. Next, we'll take this little Lady Liberty here and we're going to stamp her right in the center towards the bottom. And I'm using Copic Safe ink here because we're going to be coloring her, obviously, with Copic markers. Once she was stamped out, I went ahead and masked her as well. And we'll be doing some ink blending in the background. I wanted to kind of keep this like a night scene. So for my distress inks, I am using Faded Jeans, Chip Sapphire, and a little bit of Black Soot. For the Faded Jeans, we kind of lost that. I wanted to leave a little bit of a highlight around this little flame here, but it was too small of an area being I masked out almost the entire card. So I ended up going over the entire thing with the Chip Sapphire, and I just didn't worry about that highlight there. I did add a little bit of Black Soot right there to the top and then blended that out again with my Chip Sapphire. You can see some of the areas of my mask were starting to come up. So when I was adding the second layer of my Chip Sapphire, I just worked my way up in the direction of the masks so that they didn't come up even more. Once my ink blending was done, I took some shimmer spray and just used the little nozzle there to splatter some of that on. This will give the illusion of stars in the background. Dab that up with a paper towel and removed all of my masks. You want to just be a little careful when you remove your masks when your ink is still wet. Usually with regular distress inks, I don't have much of a problem, but you may want to give it a minute or two just to make sure that when you remove the masks, it doesn't rip your paper. For the little areas that my mask kind of came up a little bit, I just took a damp paintbrush and just went over that little area and dabbed that up with a paper towel and took away most of that ink color. Next, we'll move on to the Copic coloring, and I'm going to color her all one color. So I'm starting off here with my lightest color. This is my YG41, and I'm just mapping out my darkest areas where my shadows will be. So where her clothing is kind of gathered and underneath her hair. You want to put your shadows where you normally would as if you were coloring this multiple colors. You're just coloring it all one. I usually start with my lightest color for 2 reasons. One, it saturates the paper and makes my blending easier later. Copics blend within the fibers of the paper, any alcohol markers do. So the more saturated the paper is, the better blend you'll get in the end. And also, if I put color down where maybe my shadow shouldn't be, if I make a mistake, it's okay because it's my lightest color and I can always cover that up later. Once my lightest color was down, I'll move on to my darkest color, and we're going to only be doing a 3-color blend here. This is the G46, and I'm pretty much just going over the same areas where I put my lightest color down. I was happy with where I had placed my shadows, so now I can just go over them with my darkest color. Now my darkest color and my mid-tone ended up being pretty similar to one another, but I'm okay with that. I wasn't looking for a whole lot of dimension here. For the little flame there that she's holding, the flame itself, I'm not going over with my darkest color or my mid-tone here. I just covered the entire area with that YG41, and I'm going to leave that as is for now. We'll go back in later and add a little bit more color to that. Next, we'll move on to the YG45, which is our mid-tone color. Again, only doing 3 colors here. And I'm just extending those shadows out a little bit further, thickening up some of those lines, extending them out a little bit further. I'm going right over her entire face. I'm not really adding any shading there except for underneath where her hair is. Once I had my darkest color, or I'm sorry, my mid-tone color down, I went back in with my lightest color, the YG41, and we're going to cover up the entire image. These colors don't really blend as well as you would think that they would, the YG41 and 45. So even you could have just gotten away with just two colors here and still got quite a bit of dimension. Once I had my entire image colored with that lightest color, we'll move on to this little flame here. And we're going to go in with a yellow and an orange. I'm starting with my Y08 and just coming up from the base there and flicking some of that color in. And then I'll go in with my YR68 and just adding just a little bit to the base, blending that back out with my Y08, and then finally going back in with that lightest green color and covering up that entire area. I colored in that little area where I couldn't necessarily mask off with that the B99, and that was a pretty good match for the chip sapphire. For the background, I wanted to add a few little stars here, so I used my anti-static tool and I'm stamping the little star with the Versamark ink. I'm using Cloud 9 embossing powder by Wow. This is a clear, silvery, sparkle embossing powder. I didn't want it to take away too much from the image itself. I went ahead and heat set that. And now for my sentiment, I wanted to kind of keep this the red, white, and blue theme. So I'm going to stamp my sentiment in the white area with red ink. So I'm stamping the USA on the top, and the rest of my sentiment will be there on the bottom below my image. And I also decided that I wanted to have a little bit of a border. I didn't want this to be a full-size card panel. So I ended up trimming down each side, top, bottom, and either side. I'm not doing any measuring here. I'm just taking off just a little bit from each side so that my center area is still centered. And I will use my Tombow Mono Multi Glue to adhere this flat onto a red A2 size note card. And this is the closest I could get to that ink that we used for the sentiment. My paper was pretty warped here because I did not heat up my heat tool like I should before taking that to the paper for those little stars. So I just put this under something flat for a little bit so that I could make sure that my panel was stuck flat down. And that is the card for today. Thank you guys so much for stopping by, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye.